begin, perhaps we could start with invoking auspicious blessings of our founder Acharya Jagadguru Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai. So before I begin, I would like to seek the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis so that I may be able to execute this devotional service primarily for my own purification. So today we would be speaking about preserving the legacy, leadership in times of change. Just a brief intro. I don't know if I'm supposed to give an introduction about myself. Okay, thank you. That's encouraging. So my name is Devasri Radhika, Devasri, and currently I am based at ISKCON Zurich, and I'm serving as the head of the legal department for the Euro RGB. And the conception of this project or presentation actually began last year when I was at the GBC College, where we were young and not so young leaders or would-be leaders getting together and discussing about taking care of our devotees and how management works and how we go on in the future. And at that point I realized that this is something we could really think more about. And I hope that we can explore this topic together, and I would really keep it interactive. And I hope I would take roughly about 30 minutes of your valuable time trying to go through the slides. And the remaining 15 minutes would remain open for you to interact with questions, answers. And we started about 4 minutes late. So maybe if you do not mind overstaying just 3 minutes or so, that would be very kind. Right. So let's just touch upon the agenda. And of course, I tend to speak fast, and of course I have an accent too, if maybe you recognize. In case you don't understand something, just go ahead and raise your hand. So we have 7 agenda points, and many things around the slide I tried to keep it 7 because it's auspicious. So 7 agenda points. The first is, of course, looking at the whole concept through Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. So this concept we will be discussing a lot about legacy, change management, and succession planning. I hope that doesn't discourage any of you. So we take some inspiration from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. We will look at past attempts that ISKCON and the GBC made at succession planning. Then the need for succession planning and change management. And the moot question, is it only for the GBCs that we find this relevant? And then, of course, looking at defining leadership. How do we move on defining leadership? And how ISKCON is at a very important juncture, right here, right now. And of course, trying to put a frail plan together, a way forward. So like I said, Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana, you're all very advanced devotees, so I won't go into the etymology of it. But I tried to divide the presentation into these aspects. So Sambandha, we would be looking at the interconnectedness between organizational resilience and using tools of change management. So how the resilience and how the reason why we thrive in our management is very much connected with change management and succession planning. And before we delve into this further, I was really meditating upon the question of legacy, right? These 3 words also come from our legacy. So what is essentially our legacy? Our legacy, which is of course passed on to us by Śrīla Prabhupāda and our previous acharyas, could roughly be condensed in three. You could also do it differently, but I personally found it very comfortable to condense it in three: tradition, institution, congregation. So tradition is essentially, we have the Gauriya Vaishnava tradition that we carry as our legacy. We dress in a certain way, we believe in certain values, we take prasadam in a certain way, we associate with each other in a certain way, and that's tradition. Institution, we know the boat of ISKCON, that's the institution. The body, ISKCON, which is there, to whose value we adhere to, right? And then, of course, we have the congregation, which is each of us, right? We congregate. Each of us are, in a way, also ISKCON. So that is our legacy. If you really try to condense it in three forms, that would be our legacy. Tradition, which is the Gauriya Vaishnava tradition, the institution, which is the body of ISKCON, and our devotees. And given this, that now that we are already thinking of the Gauriya Vaishnava history, I thought this might be a nice point to raise Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So what I essentially did is I drew some inspiration from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and I also thought Chaitanya Charitamrita, but then we don't have time for it. So it would be interesting to actually look at Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, drawing inspiration from it, where we can find timeless principles of leadership, succession, and resilience that are just as relevant today as they were in ancient times. And like I had warned you, it's going to be interactive. Can you name a few leaders or kings from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam? Yes, Prabhu. Yudhishthira Maharaj, yes. Pitu Dhruva Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj. You can be loud. Ambarish Maharaj. Maharaj Parikshit. Yes. Thank you, Kante Prabhu. King Vena, yes, of course, he was also a king. Hiranyakashipu. Now we see it's getting a bit dark, yes. Rishabdev. Gaya. Bharat Maharaj. Right, so you see the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam also gives us a variety of leadership, right? And I'm very grateful for the examples that you brought forward, because I used some of them. So, of course, there is King Yudhishthira, and I'm not going to go into the details because these are stories you are very well versed with. So we know of King Yudhishthira's leadership, right? He was such a just king, a fair and noble king, and he sat there by Bhishma Dev and took instructions from him. So King Yudhishthira has such a unique personality because he was there he had such immense respect for his seniors, right? Throughout his kingship and even before his kingship. That's something which is remarkably standing out in his character. And also he had a way he carried his leadership and he passed it on. So that's quite exemplary. And of course we also know in a very cause of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Parikshit Maharaj. And we also see that Parikshit Maharaj, as soon as he got to know that he just has 7 more days to live, what did he do? He gave up his kingdom, passed it on, and then he went to Sukdev Goswami to hear Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. And the story of Parikshit Maharaj stands out for the fact that although he was so engrossed in being a great king, he was a great king, but with the blink of an eye, he was also equally detached to give it up. So that's another leadership principle we learn, that be fully invested, but also be ready to give it up when time requires. And then, of course, we have the succession of Dhruva Maharaj. And we also know Dhruva Maharaj was so passionate about getting leadership, right? He went as a young child to the forest to acquire leadership because he was rejected. And we see that Dhruva Maharaj's story is quite remarkable. It's much of devotional service and austerity, but also of strong leadership. He was given his own planet, and he ruled as a very virtuous king. But when time arrived, he also gave it up. And then, of course, you already also pointed out, we have the story of Prahlad Maharaj and his successors. So Prahlad Maharaj's story is quite unique because it was in one sense, the kingdom was bestowed on him by the Lord himself, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we see, very interestingly, Prahlad Maharaj's first son, if I'm not wrong, didn't want to become a king. So he was just way beyond it. And then the leadership went to his second son. And of course, also like you mentioned, Prithu Maharaj. Prithu Maharaj and his progeny, we know that Prithu Maharaj was such a virtuous king. He had the Chatush Kumar, the 4 Kumaras, sit and guide him. So he was deeply invested in leading a kingdom, but also deeply invested in spiritual progress. So it's quite interesting. I start off with succession planning and change management, and then suddenly I talk about Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, much of the content which you know, and you must be wondering how they are correlated. And why is it that I'm here talking about Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, but also relating to you that we have to think about succession planning? So let's briefly touch upon the correlations. So I don't want to go into details of these stories because I want to have enough time for us to have an interactive session. But the major aspect of presenting to you these examples is that Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is a lot about succession planning. That kings took on leadership with a very strong sense of duty, with being great as leaders, and then they inspired, while they were leaders, other leaders. So it's not that the son had to wait and then was told, now you are getting trained. The father or the king was already training the next in line from the very childhood, right? So why? Because it takes time. It's a very deep samskara. It's a very deep process of transfer of knowledge and learning and creativity while being at service. And we see through these various examples, a few points I would like to highlight. First is all of these leaders very closely took advice of spiritual masters and brahmanas. Secondly, they were training their future leaders already when they were in kingship. They were not waiting for it. And also third, when time came, they detached themselves as quickly as they attached themselves to the service. And now I would like to bring to your attention something more down to earth, more relevant to our day and age, succession planning in ISKCON. Right? So we know that when, of course, my limited knowledge, given I'm quite a young girl in a movement which is much, much older than me, succession planning discussion in the GBC started as early as 2006. And then I was researching a little bit about succession planning. And we see that in 2011, there were some attempts made with starting, you could say, some efforts to train leaders and think about succession planning. And also the next year, I think it was brought to the GBC. But the ripple effect of it didn't really work out, right? How much are we really seeing succession planning in play? Because we, of course, know the very harsh reality that, time is passing by and our leaders are aging. Then, as an organization, and if we were a secular organization, it would be a scary fact, but as an organization, we have to stand and think, are our next in line leaders ready already? Do we have the future GBCs, future temple presidents, future zonal supervisors ready? And like I had promised, it's not just about the GBCs, but all of you are leaders from different yatras and different temples. Are you preparing the next in line for your service? If you are a department head, from the day you enter into the department, do you recognize your responsibility to train the next in line? Because we are a movement of legacy and carrying on and passing on. And that's why it's important that we start now, because it takes time, right? Given the temporary nature of the world and our own lives, it is essential to start now, because it's a very lengthy process where the service attitude gets deeply imbued in a person. Because to be able to stay awake at night trying to solve a problem of a temple, nothing else can motivate you apart from the sense of duty and a very deep sense of care and service. And therefore, I would like to highlight, that's why also I had the compelling need to discuss here, the the need for succession planning in change management, because change is coming, right? We are, of course, constantly in a phase of change. Change is coming. But the wise thing would be to plan already. And maybe already start planning yesterday. And now what I would do is, while I am discussing still the sambandha, or the interconnectedness of leadership and succession planning and change management, I am from now on trying to touch upon some important aspects which you can carry home, which will elucidate why the leadership is so important, why the leadership has to think in a certain way for the movement to continue in the years to come. So we know that the role of leadership is very crucial in nurturing a talent pipeline. How many of you have some role as a zonal supervisor, temple president, or department head in this crowd here? Quite a big number, right? So in a way, you also recognize your own responsibility, I hope you do, in nurturing a talent pipeline. So when you recognize talent, are you tapping on the talent? That's a self-reflection question. Are you tapping on the talent? And are you then grooming them further to become future leaders? That's an introspective exercise you can do for your own leadership. And therefore, the responsibility of training future leaders. Would anyone from the audience like to read? Parabhakti Prabhu, would you be so kind as to read this? Or is it too small for you? It's too small. Anybody with good vision would like to read the slide? Yes, Shyamraj Pati Prabhu.
Future also depends on its leaders' ability to guide the movement, make critical decisions, and ensure the movement adheres to its spiritual principles. Succession planning helps to identify, nurture, and train the next generation of leaders. The current leaders must ensure that future leaders not only understand the practical aspects of administration, but also have a deep spiritual grounding in Śrīla Prabhupāda's teachings.
Thank you. So essentially, the responsibility to train leaders is very much founded in Śrīla Prabhupāda's teachings and securing Śrīla Prabhupāda's teachings. Would you be around to just pass on the mic? Thank you. And one of the important aspects of thinking about succession planning and dealing with change management in an appropriate way is preservation of Śrīla Prabhupāda's vision. And that's also the reason why all of us have gotten together here to really establish Śrīla Prabhupāda's vision and mindset in our mind as we begin to take care of his devotees. So fulfilling the directive of Śrīla Prabhupada, would anyone be so kind as to read this part? Yes, Mataji, please.
Śrīla Prabhupāda gave the GBC the authority to govern ISKCON after his physical departure, and the GBC is responsible for ensuring that the movement continues to grow in accordance with his teachings. By establishing a robust succession plan, the GBC ensures that future leaders are selected based on their spiritual qualification and commitment to ISKCON values, rather than on personal, political, or institutional interests.
Thank you very much, Mataji. So we see that, of course, now it may seem like the GBC targeted here, but you can remove the GBC and put the word I there, as many of you are leaders here. So why is it important to establish a robust succession plan? Because the future leaders, when you put them through an educational system, when you put them through a rigorous pattern or rigorous process of education, what in turn happens is that there is a shift from personal, political, and institutional interest in actually being able to live up to ISKCON's values. And of course, succession planning and change management is also essential for ensuring continuity of leadership, right? That's a very logical way to understand it. And of course, there's much more I could read further for the slides, but given the paucity of time, I would move on. And I move through it quickly because I don't think anyone would contend the importance and the need for succession planning and change management. So minimizing disruptions. And why is minimizing disruption so important for a smooth transition? We see succession planning is not only about filling in leadership, or the gaps, but it's about minimizing disruptions that can arise when leadership changes occur. How many of you think that people are quite averse to change? Isn't it? It's a fact. There is so much resistance when it comes to change. Transitions, whether in local temples or larger organization, can create instability if not handled with care. So what we are essentially doing is thinking about the faith of our devotees as leaders. By having clear, transparent processes in place for leadership succession, ISKCON can ensure stability, avoid fragmentation, and foster unity. So it's not just about you and the other person and the little temple or the yatra or just the immediate GBC related issues, but it's about the community as a whole. It's about the faith and trust that devotees have in the management of ISKCON. And of course, it also helps us in adapting to changing circumstances. And I will gradually now move a bit faster through these points. It also strengthens global unity. We are a global movement, and a very structured process can help us foster trust and cooperation across ISKCON's global network, and therefore help us enhance the movement's unity. And of course, sustaining spiritual and organizational health. It can be a source of inspiration for devotees. The sense of stability and faith in leadership is vital for the ongoing devotion and enthusiasm of our devotees. And of course, it helps us prevent leadership crisis, which can be deeply damaging. I think, we have much history to ponder upon this. And of course, why is it important? Because our leadership is not just, like it's for a company or so. It's a spiritual role of leadership. It's the responsibility in that sense is even greater. And succession planning ensures that the leaders are not only capable administrators, but also genuine spiritual guides who can maintain the integrity of our movement. And this is quite important because the GBC members are seen as spiritual authorities and caretakers. And if you translate this to your personal service, if you're a temple president, you are seen as an authority of someone's spiritual life at some point. And of course, a clear plan helps us have a proper channel of communication and ensures transparency. So in summary, succession planning and change management in ISKCON is not just an administrative task, right? We sometimes think, we don't have to, it's too commercial. It's not just an administrative task. We have to realize how it is critical to preserving our spiritual integrity and long-term health of the movement and our devotees. By focusing on nurturing leadership, ensuring smooth transition, and staying true to Śrīla Prabhupāda's vision. And in a way, it's also our loyalty to Śrīla Prabhupada that we prepare the next generation of leadership. So that was the sambandha, the connectedness part, the relationship part. And now it's the abhideya. What is the process of change management and succession planning? So we go into the process and delve a bit deeper. Of course, we are speaking of transition in action, which means to have clear guidelines and structures, how we are dealing with succession planning and change management. Communication and transparency. It has to be communicated to the body at large that, this is the structure, this is the process, these are the candidates, and this is how it's going to go. So gradually what I am doing is building your trust in the process of having a structure which kind of is not existent now. And also emotional cultural sensitivity. You cannot just throw a leader on a devotee. It has to grow on them. And it takes time. And therefore, we have to emotionally and culturally be very sensitive to the fact that every devotee will not be equally disposed to the leader you may be hoping to choose for them. So that's why we say the transition in action, it takes time. And of course, this process of preserving unity and avoiding division, which is kind of something we discussed before, can happen through these few ways. There can be more, but due to time, I restrict myself to these three. Transparent communication, right? So let the devotees know which devotee you are choosing, why, for which kind of qualities, and how you intend to train them, and what is the process of training. Encouraging dialogue. Sometimes we think that I tell you who your leader is and that's it. And this could be quite dynamic, me standing here and saying this, and maybe not so much liked. But a dialogue is important for having a long-term faith in the process of leadership. And also leadership example, that you and the next in line exemplify that you are good leaders. And of course we know that GBC has a very important role to play, right? It's the ultimate managing authority of ISKCON. And apart from that, yeah, administrative care, spiritual care, faith, trust, a lot of it is dependent on how the devotee or our devotee view the GBC. So the GBC, of course, provides the spiritual guidance, and even in the succession planning and in terms of change management, that is the role of the GBC, to provide that spiritual guidance so that the devotees are true to the vision of Śrīla Prabhupāda. And it should be a consultative process where the GBC either reaches out to local leaders, or the local leaders reach out to the GBC, and have a very active channel of communication to prepare the next leaders. And also strategic decision making. Why you choose a leader, what kind of impact the leader would have, and why such a leader would be liked or trusted by the devotees. And like I said, it's not just relevant for the GBCs, but also it can remarkably strengthen your local temple operations. Because what you're essentially doing is that when you empower local leadership, you're creating a solid base of leadership for the future. So in your head, please imagine a pyramid, which is starting from a broad base and then going up to the peak of the pyramid. And also this can enhance community involvement and adaptability. So when we are actively in a process of making leaders out of our devotees, and mind you, not everybody wants to be a leader, and not everybody may end up being a leader, but as leaders yourself, to have this eye, actually, to look for leaders all the time. And community involvement, because then what happens is your community feels more involved in the decision-making process because you're locally sourcing leadership. And also adaptability, so the change becomes much more, it goes down the throat smoothly. So, of course, ISKCON is at a pivotal junction, and I hope I can conclude in the next 3 minutes so that you can have enough time to also share some of your thoughts. Because like we said, it's important to have a dialogue. So, ISKCON is at a pivotal junction, and why do I say that? Because ISKCON today stands at a critical crossroads where growth and challenges need to be carefully considered in light of Śrīla Prabhupāda's original teachings and the changing dynamics of global society. So we have, of course, Śrīla Prabhupāda's timeless teachings, and then we have the many changes that we are facing in our day-to-day life and our society as time progresses. So as a religious organization that started with Śrīla Prabhupāda's pioneering efforts, the movement has grown to encompass thousands of temples, millions of followers, and a complex global structure. Now, the leadership needs to reflect on the future sustainability of the movement. The pivotal moment calls for a clear understanding of how to maintain continuity with Śrīla Prabhupāda's vision while addressing evolving needs, whether it's adapting to new technologies, changing societal norms, or internal growth challenges of the movement. At this point, succession planning and change management become crucial. And with this, like I had promised on the agenda, we come to a point where we discuss about defining leadership. And these are some ideas that I came across through personal brainstorming, but also speaking with several senior leaders and mentors. One is to have a service description. I know it sounds silly, but it's something we also started at our local temple. I see Radhika Prabhu is very enthusiastic about it. But just having a service, like, I don't know, but maybe the GBCs do, but individually, every yatra and every GBC can have a service description of how they define. And it doesn't have to be a GBC, it could be a temple president. You have a service description which, in full, describes what your service is, what are the challenges, and yeah, the details of your service. Next, my suggestion is to have a planning team. A team which actually works on a strategy of succession planning. And also, this is a team which would then help this GBC or this temple head or whatever in planning future sustainability. Next is have, with this planning team, because now if you read through the lines, I'm trying to create a sort of school. But yeah, this planning team will help to create certain mission, vision, and values for this position, for this process of preparing the next in line. And also there should be a design and implementation. So essentially, first, of course, you have the written form of what the service is. Then you have a team which works on getting, looking out for people, putting down the process, creating a structure. Then, as we know in most of the GBC college courses, you have to have mission, values, and vision, which of course helps to create more clarity. And then have a design and implementation in place. That is not just, like they say, paralysis by analysis. That you don't just keep analyzing, but you actually do something about it. And uniquely we see that, at least that would be my take on it, that Śrīla Prabhupāda was very emphatic about succession planning. So we of course know in Gauriya Math that we had, we had a set of leaders and which maybe did not fully understand Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's vision of how leadership should be carried on. And of course we often give the example of how Śrīla Prabhupāda wanted to have the GBC. Essentially, without getting into the debate, we have to really also understand how Śrīla Prabhupāda was very much into succession planning. So what we're doing now is not something new. We just have to do more of what Śrīla Prabhupāda was doing, being a visionary. And of course, this helps us to deal with the resistance to change. So I am just going back to the fact that so many of you raised your hand in acknowledging that changes are difficult, right? Personally or even as a society. And it just helps us to deal with change much better. So I have 7 steps on our way forward, now that I've bombarded you with a lot of ideas. This is something, of course, it can be argued we have the GBC college, but my question is the GBC college really creating GBCs? Is it really creating temple president? It's not to doubt that the training is very important, but my suggestion is to have a specialized school for training successors. So identifying, the first step towards getting this working is identifying who would be a potential leader. Then would be a process of nominating, where you nominate certain, of course, it's a work in progress, but having a school which is structured enough with mission, vision, values, and then you can send in your nominations that from my yatra or from my zone, these are the individuals I would like to nominate as potential leaders. Then comes the training. So what essentially happens is these potential leaders, or let's just take GBC as an example now that I've said the word so many times. We just take these potential GBCs all coming together to school together. So it's not that you individually get yourself schooled under your leader, but you come together under a school where you study together and imagine the impact it will have on our administrative relationships later. Next is interacting. So we also allow these future leaders to then interact and take some, light leadership role already so that they have a touch and feel of the service. And then is rehearsing. Then the GBC gives the potential GBC some tasks to carry out, being the next in line. Then is securing. So this is a very interesting aspect I hadn't thought about, but I had some senior devotees who helped me actually think in this direction, which is a fact that, of course, in the past, our GBCs were sannyasis and gurus, right? And the recent GBCs who have been taking positions, how many of them are sannyasis or gurus? If you are quite, if you face the fact, we see that more and more, let's say, grihastas or regular guys and girls or ladies and gentlemen are taking responsibility in the movement. And therefore, the question of securing them in some way also comes into picture. Of course, if you are a GBC, or if you are a sannyasi, or if you are a guru, you have some sense of support, right? There is some support system to rely on. But if, like, let's say we have a very remarkable devotee who has amazing leadership skill and is willing to take on the role of being a GBC, but then to be a proper GBC, he either has to quit a job or be a half GBC. So it's like a lose-lose situation for everybody. And of course, this doesn't mean that we make, like great funding all over. We could, but I don't know about the capability. But at least start small. In some way, secure the leadership with some sort of financial security that could encourage them to not shy away. Because so many of our young leaders, they just think that taking leadership positions in ISKCON is just strange, because it just doesn't make sense and it's just not realistic. Because how am I going to maintain myself, my family? If I don't come from a wealthy family, how am I going to do full-time devotional service but also not remain hungry? So these are realities we have to talk about. And then, of course, the last 7th step is committing. That we require a strong sense of commitment from these devotees. That, it's like an investment you're making for a future potential, and therefore you can also expect some strong sense of commitment and duty. And why are we talking about all of this? This is the prayojana part of the presentation. The goal behind all the planning, all the management, it's preserving and passing on Śrīla Prabhupāda's legacy. It's of great importance. It's our utmost responsibility. And I urge that we think about it more seriously. That the time is now and the time is running out. So these are some take-homes that I prepared for you. We, of course, looked at, I know it's going all very fast, but we looked at what is our legacy, our shared responsibility, how ISKCON is at a very pivotal juncture. We looked at this, God bless you. I was about to say Gesundheit, but no. And then 7 steps forward, and also, the prayojana, preserving and passing on Śrīla Prabhupāda's legacy. Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai. So now is the time. We could maybe take roughly 10 minutes, although I had promised slightly more, but 10 minutes to reflect, comments, questions. And we have Prabhu. He will be very kindly going around with the mic. Thank you.
I'm so excited and so looking forward to you officially becoming a GBC. I have a question. Are these slides anywhere? Are they on internet anywhere? Will they be?
I'm aware that the video recording would be made available, but I can personally give you the slides. I'm happy to share it with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's going to be difficult how to pick. So maybe I go to Radhika Prabhu. It's going to be random. Please don't dislike me. But yes, please.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. There are just 2 things that came from the morning session when we had a discussion with the group that I was with, and they said that there would be a necessity to have more relevance of the GBCs in the devotees' life. If there could be reports, annual scorecard, what did you plan for the year and what did you achieve? And release it to all the devotees. This is what me as a GBC done. So I think that would be really, really good. And the other thing is, in regards to the school that you were saying or talking about, in some parts of the world, it's really hard to find people, not because to become leaders, not because there are not leader quality devotees, but because the preaching is not going on so well that there would be anyone to choose from. So it's the preach or perish kind of dilemma in regards to having a school where there could be a pool of individuals. How do you see that part?
Radhika Prabhu for a very interesting and relevant perspective. I mean, to be honest, for me, it's just that my mind works in scientific ways, so I talk about administration. But I feel like preaching should be our primary priority. And preaching to locals, because now our temples are also filling up with South Asians, which is wonderful. But then, Prabhupada emphasized on preach to locals. So preaching is where our heart and soul goes, firstly. And that, of course, does not solve the problem that maybe, I mean, I wouldn't say ISKCON is not growing. It is growing. But then there are parts which are still untouched with the fire of preaching. And in those parts, then how do you deal with this? It's an interesting question, I think, for all of us to think about. And probably most of you are much older than me. So I think together we can think about this. But I do feel that, if you really have a necessity, and this is just trying to answer the question. If you really have a necessity to address leadership or have a leader, and there are no devotees, well, you go to the closest location. And that's something we've been doing, sourcing from the closest location. But then again, I think the leadership that comes in then should pick up the question that why could we not source leadership locally? And then, of course, extensively discuss preaching. And I think, yes, as a movement, we have to spend more time discussing about preaching. We do enough, but also practically how to make it possible. And how it's something that can permeate individual lives. That every Hare Krishna thinks that I have to go out on the street or I have to go and have a presentation in colleges. So not to think that preaching is just Harinam and book distribution, but in today's day and age it's expanded so much. So some words to address that. Thank you. So we take Prabhuji here, then Kalakanta Prabhu, and then yes. Here in blue sweater. Maybe it would be a bit more personal. You just say your name. That would be nice. I'm sorry, Prabhu, I never asked your name. Smara Hari Prabhu.
My name is Jivanuga Das. Thank you, Mataji, for your wonderful analysis.
Thank you.
I am asking this question in perspective of spiritual organization like ISKCON. Leadership generally always linked with the position, how many followers working under him. But in spiritual organization like ISKCON, let's say, the devotee, if he's at the position of the Madhyamadhikari or trying to be, Uttamadhikari with the sadhana, with the strong sadhana and seva, so can he be called as a leader? Can you inspire him to be a leader like that, without any position, without any follower? I just want your perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, there is this administrative label that you need leadership, and it's a fact. You need the label of someone being a leader. But that's not to take away from the fact that it's something very beautiful I had heard, that the leader leads from the back. So leadership essentially, the potentiality of leadership is in each of us, and depends how we channelize it. We are all leading ourselves. So notwithstanding the fact that leadership is important, you do need the label leader, but I don't feel leader is only a person who, wants to become a GBC or is a temple president. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you. And
Hare Krishna.
Oh.
This is Dr. Lakshman Das.
Hare Krishna.
I come from a medical background. I'm a doctor by profession, 30 years in practice in medical practice. I very recently joined as a full-timer in ISKCON Temple. I've been working in quality management, so that's what relates to me. We have recently started something what you have been talking about. We are developing policies of individual departments, like kitchen department, preaching department. Each and every department, we are defining the policies now. We are trying to define people who will be focusing in these departments. We are trying to train them.
Yeah.
And that's how we are trying to go about it. So your comments on this process.
Well, I think you're headed in a good direction, because that's part of it also, right? Because yes, not everybody likes structures, but structures are important. So you have created a structure and you're training devotees, so I must congratulate you. And we can connect later and talk about it a bit more. And Kalakant Prabhu had a question, if you don't mind, so that everybody gets at least one chance. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your contribution.
Hare Krishna, Kalakanta Das. I serve the GBC as a minister. And my question, thank you for very clear and precise presentation. My question is, when you talk about leadership and you touch upon the pain of waking or staying up late to solve a problem, it requires sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the crucial point in either preaching or leading. Yeah. So how do you see that in your program? How do we increase that fire of sacrifice for it?
Thank you very much. A very thought-provoking question, Kalakant Prabhu. And that's why, if you just recap, that's why I said time. Because I think I can only speak as a younger generation devotee. It needs time to grow on you, the sense of responsibility and duty, because it has to be the driving force why you wake up, even if you've slept 2 hours. You wake up and you go and you do it. And of course, I can use the word responsibility, essentially whatever, but the very seed is love for Śrīla Prabhupāda. That if you find that sense of love for Śrīla Prabhupāda and that commitment for Śrīla Prabhupāda, that becomes the basis of your, when I say your, I'm speaking to myself and fellow young leaders, that becomes the basis of your sacrifices, your duty, your responsibility, and it takes time. And therefore, in this schooling system or having a plan in place is that also you learn from people who are doing it. It's not that it's expected out of you and you think, oh, why me? You're learning from people who are doing it. You are associating with Prabhupada's vision, teachings, and what he meant when it came to taking care of the devotees. And then at some point, we pray it rubs off on you. And of course, there are blessings of Vaishnava, sadhana, and other things also. Would that suffice? Thank you very much. We take maybe two last, and then there are more. Maybe we go on, we take 4 last, and after that everybody's free to go. We make it short. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sankiton Priyadas here. So, thank you very much for a very important position of this subject matter. I've got one point to add and one potential solution to the question that Prabhu in the corner asked. I don't remember Radhakrishna Prabhu's question. The first one is around the solution. So everybody knows Congregational Development Ministry here, and Congregational Development Ministry recently has started expanding into areas, North America as well as Europe, in order to nurture and help in development congregation in areas where it's most needed. Right now there are temples which are struggling for congregation, and so there is support available now from that small team, currently focusing on North America and Europe, and then it'll expand into other areas like Africa, Australia, etc., like that, South America and so on. So there is a stall outside which is talking about congregation development. If you come and see me, I'll then be able to talk to you about that part. The second part around the legacy that you talked about, Śrīla Prabhupāda's legacy, it's vitally important that we have a rule of thumb that leaders think about around what is their leadership tendencies, whether it's GBC or temple precedents, and then define a rule of thumb that will then allow them to have that succession plan in place as their rule of thumb comes into a progression and fruition like that.
Thank you very much for your very valuable comments, Sanketan. And please feel free to get in touch with him. We pass the mic at the back, and then we have one more, and then we have the final one here.
Hare Krishna, my name is Ramya Das from North America. 2 areas. One is the training that's been talked about seems mostly to start at the top levels, the GBC. And it seems it's like you're starting a college before you have the primary school, secondary school. So that we see there's kind of a gap or a lack of candidates willing or able to move up. So is there a focus on reversing that
Shall
training?
I address that now? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very a sharp point you made. And yes, and like I said, it's a work in progress. So I thought of this top level, but then I want to think of it a bit more of different structures. But then I know, for example, now we have a new regulation. To become a zonal supervisor, you have to go through the GBC college. So now those are coming in play. So now we are making sure that our future leaders are well educated. For those who made it before, I'm not sure what to do. But at least now we have a mechanism in place which is there. But you're right, I focus more on creating future GBCs, which was primarily my focus area. And like I said, it's a work in progress. I do want to think about the other structures too. Thank you very much.
And the other question I had is, how do you fit in people who are charismatic leaders? They just kind of rise up quickly and attract a following, but they may not be trained.
That's true. That's true. And we can just pass it next. Yes, that's a very relevant and very intelligent question. But at the same time, I think leadership, of course, it was Max Weber who talked about 3 or 4 kinds of leadership, right? So charisma is a part of leadership, you know. You tend to be a certain kind of person, and that's why people do have that faith in you, and, you know. But at the same time, I think the rigorous process of training and being under a person who is constantly guiding you through it is a process of also clearing out a lot of funny things that may be there, why you want to be a leader and things like that. That's something I could just think of on top of my head. We take a comment from Radhika Prabhu and then the next question. Yeah. Jai. So the nomination committee will answer your question. Okay. Thank you. Yes,
Hare Krishna. Saranga Thakur Das from North America. You mentioned about the GBC college. I mean, you're a graduate of GBC college.
I am in the process.
In the process, okay. But you also said that you talk about a different, maybe more advanced school or something.
It's a bit more nuanced, yes.
So what is the gap that you are seeing in terms of the additional?
Right, yeah. The thing is, let's say the graduates of, I mean, the funny thing is we were graced by a Prabhupada disciple who was there to teach a course, very important course. It's a famous name, I'm not going to say it. And he was like, so all of these are going to be GBCs. And they all started laughing because none of them wanted to be GBCs in the room. So potentially, many of the graduates of the GBC college don't end up being GBCs. And they are getting a general training about ISKCON laws, etc. But it's not as deep as it has to be. I'm not trying to say it's a flawed process. It's a very rigorous process. I'm suffering through it. So I know that it's very rigorous. You suffer too. So it's very intense. But at the same time, it needs a bit more nuanced